48 hours, Howard Hughes and Tokyo Rose are all on this day. Welcome back to On This Day. Today's date is January 19th, 2022. It is the 346th day of the year. It is the third Wednesday in the fourth week, and you got 100 days until Arbor Day. Arbor Day only is celebrated now in Nebraska. You're supposed to go out and plant a tree or water one or something like that. Anyway, go plant a tree in 100 days. Today is National Quark Day. You don't know what quark is? I really don't either. It's Bavarian German, and it's sort of like, I don't know, it's like a dairy product, a yogurt, or a meringue type thing, but you take like whole milk and buttermilk, you mix together, you let it sit at room temperature for 24 hours. It turns into this like yogurtish substance, then you bake it for a while, and then you put it in like a bowl and add fruit and stuff like that. I don't know, it's like a yogurtish meringue. Yeah, Germans are into it, not me. Quark is a delicious high-protein, low-fat alternative to soft cheese and yogurt that can be used in baking, cooking, and blending. Yeah, so make some quark or look it up. It looks kind of weird. All right, let's see what else January 19th has given us. 1861, during the American Civil War, Georgia joined South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama, declaring secession from the United States. 1883, the first electric lighting system that employs overhead wires, which was built by Thomas Edison, it begins service in Roselle, New Jersey. Bet they make quark there. 1915, George Claude patents the neon discharge tube for use in advertising. This is how we got neon signs. 1920, the United States Senate votes against joining the League of Nations. 1937, Howard Hughes sets a new air record by flying from Los Angeles to New York City in 7 hours, 28 minutes, and 25 seconds. At the time, it took almost 19 hours for a passenger plane to get from Los Angeles to New York City. 1960, the United States and Japan signed the U.S.-Japan Mutual Security Treaty. 15 years earlier, we had quite a different relationship with Japan. 1977, President Gerald Ford pardons Iva Takuri de Kino. You may not know who she is, but she was known as Tokyo Rose. Tokyo Rose was part of the propaganda machine for Japan during World War II. Basically, she would get on the radio and say things to try and demoralize American troops, explaining how, your girlfriend's at home with your best friend and stuff like that. Why are you fighting here in the South Pacific? Just things like that. That's what her shtick was. That's what she did. The character she played was actually called Orphan Anne, but the American forces and the Allied forces knew her as Tokyo Rose. Thing is, she wasn't Japanese. Well, she was of Japanese descent, but she was born in Los Angeles. She was the daughter of Japanese immigrants. They lived in Los Angeles. She was a Girl Scout. She went to high school in the United States. She graduated from UCLA, the University of California, Los Angeles, with a zoology degree. Sometime in 1940, she went back to Japan to visit like relatives or something like that. And then one of her relatives here in the States got sick and was dying. So she boarded a boat and she sailed back to Los Angeles, San Pedro actually. Well, she got here on July 5th, 1941. She didn't have a passport, so that created a problem. World War II was going on. We weren't at war with Japan yet, but we were having tensions. So she didn't have a passport. They sent her back. So while she was there, she's applying for a new passport and other paperwork that would prove she's an American citizen. Well, then December 7th happens when Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, so they said no. So she was stuck. Now that Japan was at war with the United States, they found out about her. So they brought her in and said, hey, we want you to renounce your citizenship to the United States and start working for us. And she said no. She didn't want to renounce her citizenship. She didn't want anything to do with it. One thing leads to another. In 1943, they decide she's a prisoner of war because they've now deemed her an enemy alien. Since she could speak English, they forced her to broadcast propaganda. They gave her her own show called The 0 Hour. And it was actually produced by an Australian Army major and a couple other, like a U.S. captain and a Philippine Army lieutenant. These were prisoners of war that were brought in and forced to work on this show. After Japan surrendered, she didn't have any money and she's trying to get back to the United States, and she found out that a newspaper wanted to interview Tokyo Rose, and if she'd come forward, they'd give her this money, and she was broke, so she went to get the money. They arrested her. It was actually the U.S. military. After being held for little over a year, the U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Corps decided that the information they had at the time wasn't enough to prosecute her, so she was released, and she made it back to the United States. A year later, she was arrested again, this time for treason. It was the costliest and longest trial in American history at the time. She was eventually convicted and sent to prison for 10 years and fined $10,000. She did her time in West Virginia at a women's prison, but was paroled after 6 years, 2 months. She moved to Chicago after being released from prison to live with some family members, and she stayed there the rest of her life. President Ford pardoned her on this date in 1977, and she passed away in Chicago on September 26, 2006 at the age of 90. 1978, the last Volkswagen Beetle made in Germany leaves the VW plant. Beetle production in Latin America continues until 2003. They started building them in 1938, and they made changes over the years, but nothing drastic, it seems like. Now, if you're a big Volkswagen aficionado, I'm sure you're going to argue that point. Oh, it was big time different. Yeah, you know what? Not that much. The car looked the same. The car had pretty much the same engineering, better motors, better electronics, things like that over the years, but it was essentially the same car from 1938 to 2003. I've owned two in my life. 1981, the Iran hostage crisis. United States and Iranian officials signed an agreement to release 52 Americans after 14 months in captivity. Premiered on January 19th, 1988. 48 Hours premieres. Documentary news magazine that presents investigative true crime cases and compelling real-life dramas. That's what it says. I just really love this show. It's always been good. I don't think I've ever sat down, watched one episode of 48 Hours and thought, oh, that one sucked. They have always been interesting. You can, to this day, watch reruns on Investigation Discovery and TLC. They've made 991 episodes. Born on January 19th, 1944, Dan Reeves, NFL star who played in 2 Super Bowls and coached teams in 4 other Super Bowls. As a player for the Dallas Cowboys, he finished 5th on the team's all-time rushing list. He was a pretty good player back in the day. He was the youngest head coach in the NFL when he took over the Denver Broncos and led them to 3 Super Bowls. He lost each one of them. Sadly, he died about 18 days ago on January 1st, 2022. Died on January 19th, 2019, we lost Tony Mendez, famous for his work with the United States Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. He was instrumental in the Iran hostage crisis, and after retiring from the CIA, he wrote several memoirs and nonfiction works, including Master of Disguise, My Secret Life in the CIA. He spent his childhood in Eureka, Nevada, and his teen years in Colorado. Mendez was portrayed by Ben Affleck in the acclaimed 2012 movie Argo. All right, that's today's video. Hope you got some information out of it. Hope you enjoyed it. Now go out, have a productive day, and be nice to each other.